What's up, everybody? In this video, we're going to talk about how to incubate eggs.
Mainly, we're going to focus on the New Caledonian geckos like crested geckos, gargoyle geckos, but most geckos actually tend to incubate the same.
Alright, so what we use to incubate all of our crested gecko eggs, gargoyle gecko eggs, lychee eggs, chihuahua eggs is going to be the Rapashi Super Hatch. The dog got scared. Anyways, this is what I really like because it changes colors when you add water. So basically you can see here that it's pretty light, and then when you add water it gets dark. So it's a good gauge to see, you know, when the substrate is getting too dry, so when you might need to add more. And the awesome thing about this too is that it's reusable. So if, let's say, you've been using it for like a year, you know, incubating for the season or something, for the next season you could just boil it and it'll be, you know, clean from anything that it might have gotten, and you can reuse it. So that's always a plus.
So for a container, you can use any kind of container. We like to use Tupperware container because it's, you know, one of the easiest and cheaper ones to come across. And so I'm gonna use this one as an example, and we're gonna fill it up about a few inches deep. You do want a good layer of substrate so it does retain the moisture. Fill it up with water up to above the substrate and let it soak for 5 minutes. So you really let the medium soak with water, retain the water, and then after those 5 minutes, we're gonna dump all that excess water out. Alexa, set alarm for 5 minutes.
Alright, so we got our substrate getting ready. Now we gotta look for the eggs. My gecko senses are telling me that that this enclosure has some eggs. Actually, that's just keeping records. But let's check. And let me show you what we're working with here. So this is one of the females, a quad stripe crested gecko. The male is in here. Let me show you the male. Come on, buddy. The male is also a quad stripe. This guy's really pretty. He's really dark too. He gets really dark. He just thought he was falling. So the egg box is right here. Let's check it out. So we've been using sphagnum moss for the lay boxes recently. We really like it because it doesn't get the eggs dirty. And here's one egg. I'll put it like right here for now. And here is the other egg. Usually they, you know, crested geckos lay in 2 eggs. Most gecko species lay 2 eggs. So I want to make sure there's no more from the other female that's in there. And that's it. And you can tell sometimes when they lay eggs because first of all, if you keep records, so if you know that your female laid in last month, you know, in like about 30 days ago, then you know, okay, maybe she's due sometime soon again. And also when you look at the lay box, they tend to pack it down. So the female will come in here, they'll dig this up, they lay the eggs, and then they kind of cover them up and they pack it down like that. So it looks like, you know, it was, you know, packed down. And if they're not, if they haven't laid anything, usually it just looks normal like this. It's kind of hard to explain, but you'll understand when your time comes, I guess. Anyways, so these guys are gonna be parents again. I'm gonna put this back up here. And then when you get these eggs, it's very important that try not to mess with them too much. Now, what we do is you could use the flashlight, put it under the egg so you can see where the red ring is, and then you're gonna put that red ring facing up when you put the eggs to incubate. And something that's very important, don't check up on your eggs every 2 days, every week. Just let them sit there until the time comes up. You see they'll start getting bigger, bigger, and bigger, and eventually they'll hatch on their own. If they don't hatch, you know, if they go bad or something, it could be because the genetics weren't good. It could be because some environmental factors. It could be for a number of reasons, but If you do what we're telling you, chances are you're gonna succeed, because crested geckos and most of these gecko species are pretty easy to hatch.
So now that the draining process is complete, now we're ready to add some eggs. So when we get the eggs in here, we're gonna halfway bury them. And then basically just close the lid, label them. Very important to label, you know, your eggs, especially if you have more than one gecko breeding. And you can expect the eggs to hatch anywhere from 60 to 120 days, really depending on your incubation temperatures. We like to keep them at around 74, 75 degrees. The warmer you keep it, the less they're gonna incubate, and the cooler you keep it, the more they're gonna incubate. So if you incubate at cooler temps, you're generally gonna take longer, but you're also gonna hatch bigger geckos as well. So incubating them too hot or too cold can greatly decrease your chances of hatching them. So that's why we like to keep them around 75, which is right in the middle. And generally they're gonna hatch anywhere from 80 to 90 days, big healthy geckos. And like I mentioned before, that's what we have the best success at. Another thing we like to do to the medium container is to poke a couple holes. We like to do a couple pin-sized holes, one on each side on the container to allow proper ventilation. Now, if you put too many holes, it's gonna dry up the medium very fast. So it could dry up and then the eggs are not gonna be wet enough and then they can die. Also, if you put too little holes, or none at all, sometimes it could be too wet and humid in there, and it could also lead to mold and then you eventually losing that egg. So that's why a couple holes, one hole on each side or a couple holes on top is usually sufficient enough, and you should have very high success rate doing that.
All right, so another thing that's important to keep in mind is that eggs can come in different shapes and sizes. They could come in different calcifications of the shell. So I wanted to show you a couple examples. And we actually just had a little gargoyle gecko hatch, so that's pretty cool. And so as you can see, some of these eggs have smooth shells, which is ideally what you want. Some of the eggs have rougher shells. Some have shells that look like they have a bunch of little stars on them. But basically, you don't want to throw an egg away until you know 100% that it's bad. Now, if it starts to grow a bunch of mold in it, or if it starts to dent, then you know the egg is bad. The egg has died. But if it looks, you know, a little bit off with the color, you know, sometimes those eggs still hatch. So I would suggest keeping it until you know absolutely that it's not gonna hatch anymore. Obviously, if you see worms start to come out of it, it's probably a good idea to throw it away. So this is one of the eggs that went bad. As you can see, it's dented and it has a bunch of mold in it. So time to throw this egg away. All right, so now that you had eggs and you waited the incubation period and your eggs finally hatched, now it's time to put away the babies. So we like to keep the setup for these babies very simple. You could use paper towels, you could use mulch. Right now I'm gonna use mulch because it's on a critter keeper. There's a lot of ventilation in here. It loses the humidity pretty quickly. And where we are in this, you know, gecko house, in this gecko room, there's low humidity, so I like to use mulch. But it's just gonna depend on where you are and what enclosure you have them on too. Because if I have this on a close lid enclosure, I could still use mulch, but maybe I don't want to miss this much. So that's for another video, but just keep in mind that just because I do this here doesn't mean it's gonna work for you. So all I have here is a little coconut hide in there for it, a little bit of fake plant. I'm gonna take the gargoyle gecko out and put them in here. Alright guys, so that wraps up this video. If you need help setting up your babies and how to take care of your babies, check out this link. We will, you know, in an older video we showed how to do all that, but we really didn't make a video on how to incubate eggs. So here you go.
And I hope this video helps you guys be more successful at hatching crested geckos, gargoyle geckos, all those other New Caledonian geckos as well. And if you like this video, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button down below, and make sure you follow us on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. Man, there's so many social media that I can't even keep track of them all.
Yeah, and as some of you may know, we are fighting this battle right now with the FWC and the Florida legislators that they're trying to ban TEGUS and IGUANAS. So if you want to find out how you can help us, check out the link in the description. Basically, it takes a couple minutes, maybe 5 minutes, to send a couple messages that you could copy and paste. It's going to help us out a lot. And if you want to write your own personal thing, feel free to do so. Just be respectful. And see you guys next week. Thank you for watching, and say something, Manny.
See you next week.
I said that.
I know. Punch the camera.
It's going to be the Rapashi super food.
Super hatch.
Yeah, super.
It's gonna decrease your chances of hatching. So there's gonna be a lot less chances of it hatching. Wait, I gotta reword that one. I just said the same thing twice.
All right, so now that we have eggs and we've waited our gestation period, no. All right, guys, so that'll.
Oh god.